Happy Friday, second grade. You've made it through another week of virtual learning, and your poems have gotten better and better with every lesson we've done. We are so proud of all of your work. So, just to recap, this week we've been talking a lot about words that we can use to describe how something looks or how something sounds. And today we're going to explore words that describe how things move. We read a poem called My Baby Brother by Hoberman, and the poem that we're going to read today is called Fish. And it was also written by Hoberman, so we're familiar with her work. And when I read this poem, I want you to close your eyes and make a picture in your mind. So here we go. Fish by Hoberman. I want you to close your eyes and make a picture in your mind while you listen to me read. Look at them flit, lickety-split, wiggling, swiggling, swerving, curving, hurrying, scurrying, chasing, racing, whizzing, whisking, flying, frisking, tearing around with a leap and a bound, but none of them making the tiniest, 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 tiniest sound. Now open your eyes, and I want you to follow along with the words on the screen while I read it a second time. Pay attention to the words and how the author wrote them. Look at them flit, lickety-split, wiggling, swiggling, swerving, curving, hurrying, scurrying, chasing, racing, whizzing, whisking, flying, frisking, tearing around with a leap and a bound, but none of them making the tiniest, 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 tiniest sound. Okay, so this is a different view of the poem. It looks a little bit different. Notice I don't have the full poem on the screen because the words were too large to fit. But I really wanted to show you this view because this is how the poet originally wanted the poem to look. So let's look here at the line that says, but none of them making the tiniest, 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 tiniest sound. Now you can see that the words tiniest and tiniest and tiniest and tiniest get smaller and smaller and smaller. I want you to pause the video and talk to your classmates or teacher or an adult at home about why you think the poet did that. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, let's go ahead and discuss this. So the poet probably wrote tiniest, 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 tiniest in smaller and smaller letters to emphasize that the fish don't make any sound at all. And sometimes poets write their poems a specific way to try to emphasize or to try to point something out to the reader. So Hoberman, she did that on purpose. She wanted her poem to look like that, with the words getting smaller and smaller and smaller. As you can see on the screen, I have some movement words written down that I found in the poem. So let's go ahead and read these together. One of them was flit, one of them was wiggling, then swerving, leap, and flying. Now, there were a lot of other words that were also mentioned in the poem that aren't on this list. So now, with your classmates or an adult at home, I want you to look back over the poem and see if you can find some more movement words to add to the chart. You sure came up with a lot of words. Here are some of the ones that we added to the list. Scurrying, whizzing, flying, tearing around, racing, chasing, frisking. And I'm sure there were even a couple more. Now we're going to go ahead and write a shared poem together. So I started brainstorming a list of things that move, and I'm going to share my list with you. But I also want you to be brainstorming about something that moves that you could write a poem about. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you what I came up with. Here we go. So here is my list of things that move. The first thing I thought about were horses. Then I thought maybe trucks and bikes. I'm sure you all have been probably doing a lot of bike riding lately. And skateboards, kids, obviously, and Ferris wheels. So those are just a couple of ideas. Now I need to pick one of those ideas that I think I could write a good poem about. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe I'm going to go with an animal um, like the poet did, but that doesn't mean you have to pick an animal. So I think I'm going to pick horses. All right, let's see how this goes. So here's what I came up with for my poem about horses. I'm going to read it to you. Now, I want you to be thinking about how I used movement words, just like the ones that we talked about in Marianne Hoberman's poem called Fish. And I want you to start thinking about how you can use language like that in your poem. So here we go. Horses. Look at them run. Galloping, hoofing, pounding, breathing, turning, dusting, sweating. All of them making a big, 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 big sound. Now, I thought it would be fun to do something surprising at the end of my poem, just like Marianne Hoberman did. So I decided to do the letters or the word big larger each time I move down the page, just to emphasize the sound that a horse makes when it's galloping. And if you think about any time you've ever heard a horse or seen a horse on TV, if they're galloping, as they get closer and closer and closer, the sounds that they make get louder and louder and louder. So that's why I decided to do that at the end of my poem. So now your teacher is going to walk you through a lesson where you will choose something that moves and you will write a poem about it. Now you can pick something from the chart that I gave you, or from maybe a chart that you worked on with your class or your teacher, or you can write a poem of your own choice. The only rule is that it needs to be a poem about something that moves.